roadmaps. And it's all about how you can take your roadmap, your traditional time-ordered list of things you may or may not do, may or may not be able to build, and how you can build that into the tools, like the strategy you need for product-driven growth, which is what we all really want. Cool. All right, awesome. So we've done the Slido survey. By the way, if anyone still needs it, you just click, you go to Slido, you type in #5868769, you get it at Slido, or you can click the QR code. 2 ways of getting it. Okay, so good to meet you, everybody. Some familiar faces, and there's lots of new faces here as well. So I'm Nick. I'm a tech founder with a particular focus on growth and product. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years or so since I started my first business. The first business I started was one called CloudMate. Good to see some of the team here today. I obviously didn't, I wasn't that terrible a manager, because some people have come back to see more of me. So good to see you guys. And I recently joined a new SaaS business called Sama as Chief Product Officer. So I've spent the last close to 20 years as an operator, taking businesses from zero through to scale up, through to exit. And that's something I absolutely love doing, being on that operations side of things. But I've also had the opportunity over the last few years to spend a lot of time engaging with product strategy experts and figuring out what is product strategy? How do you build a product strategy? How do you make sure you have one for growth? And I've absolutely loved having the opportunity to do that. In the last few months of 2022, I have taken 3 really interesting companies through the steps to build their high growth product strategy. Harper, I'm going to show you some examples of this later on today. They're an early stage delivery company. With them, we put together a North Star metrics framework. We're helping align their whole team behind a single idea of what success was. Site Improver at the other end of the spectrum. So they're a 500-person high growth company. There's some people from Site Improve here today. Hi, guys. We work together to work on the scaling strategy. And with Rain, who are a earned wage access fintech product, we worked with them on their team organization. All of these are the different elements of a product strategy required to grow, and that's what we're going to look at today. For the rest of this year, and I work with a very small number of companies because I like to go deep. I like to do it in a very hands-on way, making sure it's all my time with the company. I'm going to be starting more slots with companies in July, September, and November this year. What that typically looks like is a mix of workshops with me, hands-on, going into things like this, getting deep in how you do your thing, how we can create a strategy. Coaching sessions, which are weekly drop-ins for you to come and bring your problems, your success, your worries, your victories to me and for us to reflect on. And then your work, doing the work yourself. I think it's wonderful to see some of the other companies that I've done this with over the past few months here today as well. So positive to see that client retention. So thank you, guys. So enough about me. What we're here today to learn about is startup killers. What are the things that are going to kill your startup before you even get going? What are the things going to kill you when you think you've got product market fit? What are the things that are going to kill you when you've got product market fit? So I've tried to digest everything I've seen from me and friends and colleagues who I've worked with over the past years into 3 key toxicities for startups. And the first, which is the one we all suffer from, is underwhelmed users. Users who are a bit meh rather than yeah. This is a real killer, right? This is the one that means you cannot quite get fit. It means you can't expand into those new segments. This is something I see all over the place. Product strategy is at the heart of this problem, the way we think about our product. The second is having a slow pace of learning. The number one thing a startup's there to do is learn. We start at the beginning, and no matter how big your seed or Series A or Series B round was, you have more to learn than you know today. So having a slow pace of learning, taking a long time to create assumptions, to validate them, or even not having any framework for working with hypotheses, this is something which will actually kill our ability to build growth plans. Finally, is disengaged teams. If as the founder, as the CPO, the leadership, we manage to figure out how we can delight our users, we can figure out how to run experiments and learn really quickly. If the team that we are reliant on to do that is disengaged, what's going to work? It's not going to happen. Things are going to fall apart, and we'll be frustrated. We'll be having all these great ideas, we'll have great board meetings, and then we'll have no execution whatsoever. So what I've figured out over the last few years of doing this is a startup detox for founders. How do you get rid of this toxicity that can come and ruin your plans? I think there are three big things we got to do, which is what I'm going to cover today. The first is working out how to focus the team on generating user yeah. And I really mean focus the team. I don't mean a hero founder or hero chief product officer. I mean, let's work together with our teams to help the individual people in our team, whether we're 5 people, 50 or 500, all stages that I'm working with today. Let's empower the teams to figure out what it is that the users love. I'm going to show you a bit about that. Then let's work out how to speed up our rate of learning. Let's make sure we do not specify our roadmap for the next 4 quarters or 12 quarters in a row, and then force fit all of the experiments we run and all of the customer feedback to fit a preconceived idea of a roadmap. Let's forget the idea that we can predict what's going to happen in the future, and let's focus on figuring out what the future should be. And this message is so pertinent today. I mean, who has not read the YC memo today, by the way? If I say the YC memo, so everyone that got this, right? So Y Combinator just sent a memo out to their startups. If you guys were around in 2007, it's the same as the Sequoia, stop wasting all your money on champagne memo. The shit's about to hit the fan. So YC just sent this out today saying there is a downturn coming, plan for 2 years of very poor growth, raise anything you can, think very carefully about your investments. This is happening right now. So we've got to make sure we're able to learn quickly and efficiently within that environment, because the whole world is changing right now. Getting more from your team than you ever thought possible is the key ingredient. If our investors are telling us to be really cautious and scale back our hiring plans, what does that mean? They're not telling us to scale back our growth plans, are they? They're just saying cut costs, not cut growth. So we need to figure out how we can get even more out of every single one of our team members. So let's figure out how we do that. I'm going to run you through 4 things that I've learned about doing these things over the years and with the companies that I'm working with. Cool. So the first is about how to listen to your customers. Who's good at listening to your customers today? Just give me a show of hands if you think customer listening is central to your model. Yeah, okay, cool. So we got it. We got the message. We're out there listening. When I started as chief product officer at Summer, the first thing I did was talk to every single one of our customers and end users who had maybe churned. We have a very good retention rate, but you can always find some churned customers out there. Really good way to start off in a new position. Talk to all the people who don't like you. So this was me back in 2018, right? When we were sort of struggling to get things together. You can sort of guess the vibe in this room. I think we've all been in meetings like this, right? Failure, blame, stress. Failure because products aren't connecting with our customers. What do you do when that happens? Well, then we start blaming each other. As the designer's problem, the shade of blue was the wrong one. It's the sales team's problem. It's lead gen's problems. The leads are all crappy leads. And that leads to stress, because ultimately, when your products aren't connecting and you blame each other, you end up failing personally, and no one comes to work to fail personally. So what we did was we figured out how to separate what customers say they want from what they really want. Back in the day, I was doing this with an enterprise company, but I've done this with B2B, SaaS, and B2C, and it's the same mechanism. What customers say they want isn't what they really want. What happened when we did this? It immediately started to drive engagement, alignment, success. Our customers wanted to listen to us. So when we started to figure out what they actually needed, it made it way easier to talk to the customers. When we started to build alignment inside our team, we all got on the same page, and that drove success. And we ended up being personally successful. So the act of going out and really listening to our customers not only led to success with customers, it led to us being successful and more happier as well. So we got a positive flywheel that started spinning. Now, I've spent the last 2 years really boiling down the ingredients to customer listening into the very essence, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. I believe there are only 3 things we need to figure out when we're talking to customers. So only 3 things we're looking at. Not do they like it, do they not like it, not what their anxieties are, not what they think about the future. 3 things. Firstly, What are their outcomes? What are they trying to achieve? They're trying to get from A to B. What does B look like? And why is that important to them? So what's the outcome the customer is trying to achieve? Number two, the problems. What's stopping them from getting to that outcome? So I want to be able to grow my business. What's stopping me growing my business? Is it a lack of staff? Is it a lack of investment? Is it lack of capability? Finally, is success. And this one is frequently missed out. We talk a lot about problems. Very capably, we talk about problems. We often don't talk about outcomes, but we almost never remember to talk about what does success actually look like. So if I want to go from A to B, literally go from A to B in an Uber or a Free Now or on a bike or on a taxi or swimming or running, what does good getting to B look like to me? Is it that I need to get there on time? Is it that I need to get there refreshed? Is it that I need to get there, in the case of going for a run, being exhausted? So we need to put these three things together. What's the outcome the customer is trying to achieve? What's the underlying problem that is stopping them achieving their outcome? And how do they measure success quantitatively and qualitatively? Now, I could go on for hours about all the detail behind this, and that's what we do in the courses that I run, and people run exercises and build out value prop canvases. But I've just tried to boil down the punchline for you today, which is this. There are 10 questions to ask customers to figure this stuff out. The first is, what are you trying to achieve at home and at work? This is the opening gambit that I have in almost every customer discovery I do. Hi, I'm Nick. I'm Chief Product Officer. What I'd really like to understand is, what are you working on at the moment? What's really important to you that you achieve this quarter? Then they tell you. The next question is, what's important to you about achieving that? Not why. This is a why question without a why. Why makes people feel attacked and questioned, and why can lead to defensiveness. What's important to you about achieving that? When you've achieved it, what will you be able to do that you cannot do today? Be amazed how many people this one stumps. They think it's incredibly important to do something. Yeah, I'm trying to source a new SaaS platform to look after the staff in my company. What's important to you about doing that? What will you be able to do when you've done that you can't do today? B2B sales, the question you often get, the answer you often get here is, my boss will be happy because she told me to do it. What do you find out then? Well, now we're not talking to the decision maker. We're talking to a purchaser. We're talking to someone who is not going to make the ultimate decision. What's at stake to you personally? People engage with products that have some kind of an emotional resonance. And it can often be difficult to get to like boil down what is it emotionally that someone is trying to get out of something. What's at stake to you personally? Fantastic question to do that. What will it feel like when you've achieved your goals? So this is my top 5 list of questions to work out the outcome. What is someone trying to achieve? Next, we move on to the problems. So once you've figured out the outcome, so let's say you are a B2B SaaS doing marketing analytics. The outcome of one customer type could be growth. The outcome of another type could be preventing errors from appearing within web pages with the same tool set. So once we figure out the outcomes the customer is working on, then we move to the problems. What problems do you come across when you're trying to achieve growth? What's hard about achieving growth? A really good one is, what workarounds have you created? And the reason for this is that people will get so accustomed to using really kind of crappy software, they often forget they have a problem with it. And this is very famously how the whole wave of collaboration software, Figma, Dropbox, and so on, that are the unicorns of today, this is where they came from. There was nobody out there when Figma launched who was complaining about emailing Photoshop files back and forth, because emailing Photoshop files back and forth was just what you did. You had to do it. And yet Figma have created this, Figma and Canva and Dropbox have created multi-billion-dollar businesses because it was a real pain in the ass to be shipping Photoshop files and all the design assets all around the place. So had we been back there interviewing designers 10 years ago, we could have been saying, when you're doing this work with Photoshop, what workarounds do you have? How does it look like to you? How do you manage to do this? Oh, it's a massive pain, we have to send one email and then another, and we have an Excel file where we write down who's looked at it and reviewed it, and we have a PowerPoint that says where we are in the stage of design reviews. Oh, okay, cool. So now we have something we can work on. We can remove those problems. We're going to build a product people prefer using. What stops you getting a good outcome? So what is it that really stops the outcome you're trying to achieve over here being a good one? Now, if you remember, the final thing which I said we normally miss out in customer interviews is success. How do we qualify success? So 2 questions I ask for this are, what's the minimum you need to achieve? And finally, how do you define a job well done? Essentially, the question is, what does success look like for you? Now, when you're asking these questions, make sure to probe for quantitative and qualitative answers. So not only qualitatively, what does it feel like? What does success mean to you? But quantitatively, how do you measure success? So how will you know when the product has been successful? Who else is measuring it for you? Particularly in the B2B context, this gets very important, right? And this is what will often lead to a product feeling like it gets product market fit and then tailing off, because you sell into one early adopter user group within the business who are up for buying, a small license package of everything, but you failed to deliver business value because you deliver value to your buyer in HR or your buyer in design, but they actually need to deliver some business value with your product. And you missed that one. You thought you were just making something that was to make their life easier, but actually what Figma needed to do is make it faster to produce better designs, not just, funnily enough, the CEO doesn't care if the designers are annoyed about Photoshop. The CEO cares about the ability of the web page to convert people. So we need to go all the way up the pyramid and figure out what's the ultimate outcome people are trying to drive with our product. Cool. So that's everything. That is not everything, but that is the five-minute version of customer discovery interviews and how to get the customer understanding you need to figure out what's the difference between a great product and an average to not very interesting product. Any questions, drop it into Q&A. I promised you this was going to be very practical and hands-on with no theory, and here we go. We're straight into it. So I want to talk a little bit now about team alignment, getting everybody feeling and really acting like they're chasing the same goal. This one is a super big one. So go back for 4 or 5 years, I was anxious, I was confused, I was stressed. We weren't scaling, the team weren't getting it, and I had a board meeting in 2 weeks, right? Everyone has been there. If you haven't, then hopefully you never will, but you never know. What was going on here was really that, after diagnosing this, do we have a culture problem? Do we have, this problem? Have we hired the wrong people? It's just that no one was very clear on what they were supposed to be doing. There was a total lack of clarity in what any individual person and team's objectives were. And at a company level, I thought I'd set the objectives, but it really wasn't clear. So what I did was I gave the gift of extreme clarity by setting a North Star metric that aligned everybody in exactly the same direction. That created alignment, clarity, and value. We had one metric for all. So this North Star metric was one single metric that everybody could align behind. Under the North Star metric, we had one metric per team. And ultimately, all of this measured customer value delivery. I'm going to talk you through what all these kind of buzzwords mean. But customer value delivery is when your customer gets value, not when you get paid. So customer value delivery is not ad clicks. It is not monthly subscriptions in consumer, and it's not annual renewal in SaaS. Customer value delivery is what happens to drive those outcomes. So who here has, I presume everyone by now has heard of North Star metrics, very much popularized. Almost every company thinks they have one. Many, as we're going to explore, are not using them in the right way. And I've worked with 20, 30, 40 even companies to set North Star metrics in the last couple of years. So this is how North Star metric works. You're trying to achieve your business goals. Business goals could be scale from 1 million to 5 million ARR. Business goals could be open up new business in Asia. Business goals could be launch new product to capture this market. They're the things you commit to your board. They're generally financial metrics, And typically what happens is the CEO and the C-suite will try and pass these metrics down into the product management layer. Say, product managers, we're all about ownership in this country, so you now own the business goals. And that is an exceptionally bad idea, because people can only take responsibility for goals that they own, that are completely within their influence. So if I'm set a goal, which I don't believe I actually influence, something outside of my influence, when that goes well, I don't feel that great about it. I don't learn anything from it. And when it goes badly, I just feel it's unfair. So as a product manager, if I'm purely measured, rewarded, and judged based on the ability of the app to drive DAUs, and then some freak thing happens in the market where, like, for some reason the competitor shuts down their product, we get all the DAUs, and now I'm the hero, that doesn't help my personal development. If the opposite happens, if some freak market occurrence happens, or some, Apple changed their marketing rules again, and we lose DAUs, that wasn't my fault. I didn't know that was it was not what I was working on the product. I just feel it's unfair. So the idea of the North Star metric is we need to get a behavioral metric which directs us and our teams towards the goals. We answer the question with the North Star metric: how would users behave if they really loved our product? So many companies out there, they have North Star metrics, which are financial metrics. They are growth targets, they are revenue, they are clicks. Even MAU, I think, is a pretty poor North Star metric, because it's very kind of high level, and often it's just a proxy for ad revenue. None of this is about user love. This isn't about user value creation. If anyone remembers Groupon from back in, the 5-10 years ago, whenever that was a thing, Groupon famously had major growth, driving people to restaurants and beauty salons and so on to get cheap deals, but they forgot user value creation. You'll have all had this experience. You buy a Groupon, you go to the restaurant, and you're sat in the back corner in, like, the really crappy dark space with all the other Groupon cheapos who bought the Groupon, and then you're treated badly by the waiters. So as a customer, I get treated badly. As a restaurant, I also get treated badly, because I give all this money to Groupon to get a customer who then doesn't return. So they completely missed having a North Star. Had they had a North Star metric, which was due with retention, maybe. Imagine that. If Groupon, the whole thing was built around, we want repeat users. We want people to come back into this service. Would have been a different story for them. So North Star metrics must be behavioral. And they must focus your whole organization on the next big milestone. What that is, it depends on your stage. Early stage, that could be 1 year. If you're later stage, Series B, 50 to 100, 500 plus people, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 year horizon for your North Star metric. Really importantly, it needs to be memorable and accessible to your whole team. And this, I do a lot of work with companies on figuring this out, because this is a hard one. You need to have a North Star metric which is fit for purpose and truly is how your users would behave if they loved your product. But if it's too complicated, if it's, the subset of users who are retained after having taken these actions and who haven't done this, that's not going to work. So it needs to be a single line, which is really understandable. So I'm going to run you through a few examples of some North Star metrics that I've worked on setting in the last few months. Starting with the one from CloudMade, my own business, which was in 2018, we needed to activate customers. We had a North Star metric, which was demo to first meeting conversion. Before this, we'd spent a lot of time kind of stressing about what color the button should be and where all the UI should be placed. And we thought that was the root cause of the conversion problems we were having. Then what we figured out was, well, maybe where we need to put the attention of everybody is simply on getting that conversion from demo to first meeting. How would our users behave if they loved our product? They would want to have more meetings about it. So we focused everyone's attention on that level, saying, let's deal with the shipping of the product when we have to ship it. Let's deal with now converting people at the top of the funnel. So laser focused us all on the top of the funnel. It started to align product managers, salespeople, and designers all on the same page. We all started to see things the same way. Completely different ballpark here is a company called Gaia GPS, who I worked with them prior to their acquisition in 2020, 2021. To build a product strategy for post-acquisition when they're integrating into their acquirer. So we were all about revenue growth at this point, very strong product market fits, a bootstrap company that now had lots of investment. We wanted to grow revenue. Now we could have grown revenue by saying, let's buy as much ads as we can. Let's get really technical and let's just like smash the ad market and get as much revenue in there as possible at the top of the funnel. But we didn't do that because we believed in user value creation. Instead, we focused on 90-day user retention. What percentage of day one users are still present in the app at day 90? And this sent a very powerful message to everybody in the company. If you're in the growth team, if you're doing the ad buys, super important acquisition strategy, but you better make sure you're acquiring customers who are going to be here in 90 days. We specifically do not want to be buying customers who are not going to be here in 90 days. So growth, marketing, we need to be super connected to the product team. We need to work out who are the customers who use the product. And this led to all kinds of exploration within the data that we had about what led to people retaining. What were the behaviors that led to a retained customer? Again, and a nice simple one as well. Final one for today is what I just finished doing with Harper. Their focus is on growth in 2022. And after lots of back and forth and multiple meetings, we settled on a North Star metric of returning customers. And we switched through the course of this from being very transaction focused. In e-com, transaction is often a good metric, actually, for a good North Star metric. If eBay delivers value to me, I will tend to use it often. So there'll tend to be lots of transactions. But instead, we chose returning customers. Said what we want to do is make sure we get customers coming back to use the service. Now, what's super cool here is the first time the Harper team talked to shared this metric with their own team internally. They said, okay, guys, this is it. Focus growth, North Star metric, returning customers. What ideas do you have? The team started to put their hands up and say, we think if we change the way we do this in our delivery system, it will improve returning customers. And the other team said, yeah, there's these 3 things that we could be doing, but I didn't know this was our focus. So simply giving this clarity allowed their team, and this is not a big scaled up company. This is a sort of medium, relatively small company. It allowed their team members to start to take ownership, to start to take responsibility for what they were doing, because there was clarity now. Where there was no clarity before, there was no clarity. So I'm a massive advocate of North Star metrics. They are an incredible way to focus you on customer behaviors, not financial metrics. It helps your teams make decisions faster. When your teams have this clarity, they can move faster. And it dramatically increases trust within teams. One of the biggest sources of a lack of trust in teams is a lack of clarity on what the mission actually is. So that's North Star metrics. Next is team organization. Now, when I first got very into team organization, I first thought I had a culture problem and spent a lot of time trying to diagnose culture problems. There was a lack of responsibility. There was a lot of blaming. There was a lot of it's not my job. It's their job. Design didn't spec it. Engineering didn't build it. Sales didn't sell it properly. There's a whole lack of accountability. Sales can't sell it. It's not my problem. What I figured out was this wasn't a culture problem. It wasn't like a mission, vision, values problem. It wasn't a hiring problem. It was an organization problem. What I hit upon is a really simple way to organize your teams. Not to turn your people into dolphins, which is one approach, but instead to give people enough clarity to align them with enough freedom to inspire performance. And it's all about this trade-off between clarity of alignment with freedom to execute so that you're inspired to perform. Sum this up in three ways: tightly aligned, loosely coupled, with extreme clarity. So you need to be very aligned over the direction you're going, the vision you have, the metrics you're going to measure it by, what customer success is, what the end game is for you. And then teams need to be loosely coupled to each other with no interdependencies. And there needs to be extreme clarity over what everyone's role is and why that role is important. So I'm going to show you 3 different organizational structures that should exist within the same team to enable this. And the example I'm showing is from a 20-ish person startup. I'm doing this right now with teams like Rain, which is scaling north of 500 people. So the same principle works in much bigger teams as well. So the first is line managers. So like the job of a line manager is people's personal well-being and progression. But typically what happens is we confuse the role of a line manager, that kind of nurturing and career progress, with the role of a team lead. And there are two very different mindsets there. The line manager is purely well-being and progression, whereas the team lead is about success of the mission. And those two things can conflict with each other, right? So we want a nurturing and supportive environment for our people, but we also want highly productive teams that get stuff done. So what I found really successful was splitting out those roles and making a specific line manager role where you find the most nurturing and most supportive person in the company, and you make them responsible for being a line manager, help people's learning and development and their well-being and their career progress. And then you make sure that they have 8 to 10, sort of 7, 8, 9 direct reports. If you have line managers with less than those number of reports, it's very inefficient. If you have them with more than sort of 8 or 9, it's also inefficient. So there's a sweet spot that you need to hit. Even if you're a 10-person startup, it's time to start thinking about this. If you're 20 people, it's 100% time to be doing this. Beyond that, it's an absolute necessity. The next is guilds. And the idea of a guild is that the guild enables your squads to move independently. So how does a guild work? So let's say you are running 2 or 3 different squads who are all accessing the same code base and interfacing with different parts of the user experience. There's a kind of squad focused on the top of the funnel, one on the middle, and one on some of the features within your app, but it's the same app that they're accessing. Sounds like a nightmare for consistency of design, right? So what the guild leader is able to do is, on a weekly meeting with her designers in the design guild, she's able to say, okay, people, show me what you've been doing, show me what changes you're making, show me what you're learning. And then she can make the call over whether the changes being pushed into the app are the right changes to make or not. Say, no, moving the button over here, that's too distracting. It's outside of our design guidelines. We're not going to do that. Or, wow, you moved the button over there and you're getting really good results. Let's keep on going at that because that's super interesting. I see we're getting traction, and we'll figure out what happens with the design guidelines later. Okay, so this is this balance between freedom and guidance, that you're having someone responsible for consistency whilst allowing your team members to execute within the framework. One of the most important elements of this is what I've called tech here, but you can also call solutions architecture. So the idea of saying we are all making changes to the same code base. So we need to make sure there are solutions architects who can make a call if we're going too far, if we're changing something which is going to have disastrous consequences. If a change is going to lead to bottlenecks within the cloud infrastructure, or is going to put such a big burden on costs that we can't do it. Your line manager and your guilds, though, they are all there to enable the squads. There is no reason for having line managers and guilds other than the squads, because this is where the work happens. Squads are entirely responsible for the mission of their teams. So the way I organize this is to make sure we have a company North Star metric. So a user behavior metric, which tells us how would our users behave if they loved our product. And then to make sure each of these squads that we align here have a very clear mission, an outcome-based statement, and a metric, probably a proxy metric, one that's predictive of the North Star. They have a very clear leader, a squad leader who is responsible for the attainment of that outcome. So the squad leader is not a technical leader. This isn't necessarily your most experienced React Native developer, your most experienced Android developer. The squad leader is the person who is best able to achieve the mission, to lead the squad towards the mission. And then each of these squads are able to work independently. So if we're a B2B SaaS and we have a website, we have an app, and we could have each of these squads would probably be working on that same website and that same app. So there is not an Android squad and there is not a web squad. There are outcome-based squads. There are improve the conversion rate on the front page. That might be the growth team. Improve the retention rate of this particular customer type. Move our NRR, on net revenue retention, from 80 today to 120. Fantastic mission for one of these teams to take on board. So the idea is these squads are cross-functional, they're outcome-based, and they're able to go anywhere within the product that they need to. They can dip into any bit of the code base. They must absolutely be able to operate independently of each other. They cannot be sharing resources. They need to have their own people able to execute their mission. Difficult to do in a startup, right? Because you need the expertise, and you may have one solutions architect / CTO / data scientist. What do you do then? That's where the guilds come in, because the guild is responsible for the consistency of the product. So you're trusting your developers to make the right call, and they can always check in with the guild leader and ask her what her view is, what her experience has been on the change that they're making. So putting these three things together, I've consistently found allows you to move faster, to build better products, to build teams that are far more empowered and far more able to achieve their mission. Is putting together your line managers for the career progress of people, putting together your guild leaders for the consistency of the product, the code base, the design. And most important is the squads for the execution and success of the mission. Okay. Final in our whistle-stop tour here is running experiments. So all of these things are important, but if you cannot run experiments, we're not going to learn. Experiments are how we learn. So this is my super quick framework for running experiments. So you've got a North Star. We figured that one out. We have an idea of which customer behaviors we'd like to focus on. You know, we want to get more people downloading our app. We want to get more people engaging with it daily. We want to get teams working with our B2B SaaS product. But you have little or no idea what you need to do to move the needle. That's the reality. We have ideas, but we do not know. If we knew, we'd just be building it. We don't know. We have theses. So to learn, we're going to run experiments. We're going to think like a scientist. And this is the simplest way that I can break down running experiments. We state a belief. We believe that. Normally, commandments given by the CEO or salespeople or whoever it is, we need to build, we need to change the button over here. We need to change the copy to make it more emotional, to resonate. Great, you can take all those inputs coming from leadership and you can just turn into a hypothesis. We believe that we need to change the copy on the front page to make it more emotional. To verify this, we will, are we going to change the homepage? No, let's mock it up and show it to 5 people. So to verify this, we're going to mock up a new version of the homepage and we're going to show it to 5 people who match our ICP. What we're going to measure, we are going to measure the response of those people. We're going to measure whether they could read it, whether they understood it, and whether they could repeat back to us what the text said on the page. We predict that. We predict that this isn't going to work, actually, because we don't think the CEO knows what they're talking about. But we're going to do it anyway, just to prove to her. So we don't actually think it's going to work. But we'll ask her if it's going to work, and she will say it will. If we meet or exceed our prediction, we will what? If it works, we'll do it. If it doesn't work, what should we do? Should we go back to square one? So you can basically agree with your team this flow before you do something, which massively helps with learning, massively helps with your certainty. So this is a nice framework. You can grab this out of my slides. I normally put this into a Notion table or an Airtable or a Google Doc, and just every single thing we do in product and growth across all of those squads, it's all a hypothesis. Everything that's going on is a hypothesis for how we're going to do something, how we're going to verify it, what we're going to measure, what we predict is going to happen. Now, my top tip here for the 2/3 of us who are not CEOs is when you're doing this, get the CEO to have a guess at every single one of the things you're predicting. The reason to do this is not to like shame your CEO. The reason is to show to the team that none of us really know what's going on. None of us have a crystal ball. We're all in this together, trying to go from this murky world of maybe our customers love our product, maybe they don't, to crystal clear understanding of our chosen customer segment. But the only way we go from that murky view to that clarity is by just admitting that we don't know what we're doing. But that can be scary for people, particularly more junior people. So getting the leadership to have a go at making predictions, then showing that we all get it wrong about the same amount of time, is the best way I've ever found to level the playing field and get people inputting ideas. So that's been my whistle-stop tour of 4 of the most important areas of product strategy. I can really summarize this all up for you like this. Number 1, talk to customers so that we're building products that solve their real burning needs. Number 2, choose a North Star metric that aligns all of your efforts behind driving a single customer behavior. Number 3, organize your team to get more from your team that you ever manage possible. and make sure you're consciously, deliberately running experiments to unlock growth. See a few hands going up. That's great. I'll definitely be taking questions in the Slido room. So jump in there if you have questions. I love doing this stuff for people. So this is the kind of thing that I've been doing with companies over the past few months. I have 3 slots open this year to go deep with one company at a time, answering these questions, setting the North Stars, setting up the growth experiments, building the product strategies. And we do that through workshops, coaching sessions, and then a lot of work on your part. What I'm going to leave you with today, though, is something that I really think can help a lot, which is I'm going to send you through an 8-part guide to product strategy. So I've gone a little bit deeper and I've sliced up the things I've been talking about because I know this has been very fast. And I'm going to send you 2 emails a week starting Monday, which is going to walk you through each step of the way, each one of those 4 components that I talked about. And I hope that at the end of those 4 weeks, you're going to have virtually everything you need to put in place a product strategy which is going to drive you towards growth. That is my intention. If you need to go faster than that, then you can join my course. I have 3 spaces open for the rest of the year. So fantastic. I'm going to open the Slido room right now, and we'll see what questions we got here. You're automatically enrolled for this, by the way, so you don't need to click on anything or send the emails. You're going to get these emails, my assurance on that. Okay, so make sure everyone interacts with Slido because you can like vote up and down each other's questions. And I'm just going to work from the top to the bottom on the questions. So Steph, what's a good approach you'd recommend to set a new product vision when the product surface area is large and the company needs to focus and simplify? Well, what I quite like is firstly just to show the big all-encompassing product vision. So first get all of that in place in one view. I'd normally do it in a Miro board. If you can do it in person, do it in person. Then try and force, oh, sorry, I didn't set that as the one I'm answering. Let me try and do that. Then try and enforce some sequencing. So I take the very big picture vision and then I sequence it into a sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ideally 3, but max 5 steps along the way. And try and get agreement within the team that we can't do all of this in one go. We need to get it sequenced. So I take big vision, start to sequence it up, and then you've sliced your product surface area, down into 20% in the case of 5 of what it was. Then it's within each of those that I would, within each of those buckets, they start to go deeper on the product strategies. So I'd build different product strategies for each of those different components of the vision. Answer your question, Steph. Feel free to unmute and shout if I didn't.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. This is what's top of mind and the reason I came into this session today, because I'm trying to work on exactly this problem. So thanks very much for your thoughts.
Awesome. It's iterative, right? Particularly if you're coming into a founder-driven business where the founders have the vision in their head and they want it all now. So I find just showing the immenseness of it first is a really good first step. Cool. So I've answered that. This is, what if you're stuck with a 20-year-old ex-startup with multi-layer strategic, tactical, product level, top-down, roadmap-based management culture? Well, I would change it. So I'd figure out if I have agency to change it and then try and change it. I mean, so this whole talk started from a big LinkedIn thread about product roadmaps, and I sent a mail about it following up, and I think I posted to LinkedIn. I wrote an article. There are some good reasons to have a roadmap. If you know what you need to build, if you 100% or 98% know what you need to build, it makes sense to write it down and sequence it so we can slice up the work. If you're coordinating a massively complex project with different overlapping teams and responsibilities, have a roadmap. But the way that startups get successful is not by having overlapping teams with interlocked responsibilities. It's by having independent teams which are aligned towards a common direction who do not have cross dependencies. Therefore, they don't need a roadmap. So what would I do? I would firstly understand what is the driver of this startup's approach. So why do they have this product level, top-down, roadmap-based management culture? Like, where's that coming from? What are the beliefs? So was there some time at which having this approach made the startup successful? Or what is it ingrained in one of the board members, one of the founders, one of the team members' way of thinking? Remember, every behavior anyone has or exhibits, the beliefs we have, they're not burnt into our brain at birth. They're developed over life, and they're developed in a positive context. Even if you smoke cigarettes, you learned at some point that smoking cigarettes was a good idea. You got to hang out with the cool kids at school or whatever it was. So a habit, as bad as smoking cigarettes, which is product level, top down, roadmap based thinking, that's come from something positive. So there's probably someone who learned that in a different environment. Maybe they're from the hardware industry where these things are important. Maybe they're used to working on massive, massive projects where you need a roadmap. So I'd first try and unpick that. Then I would try and carve out a small set of the company, some small teams, to run a strategy-based approach like I am, with a clear vision, North Star metric, clear metrics sitting under that. And I would show some success cases and slowly start to change the culture. Thank you, Anonymous. What's really the difference between your strategy and a standard roadmap? I think I kind of hit that in the last one, actually, where the difference is a standard roadmap implies that, firstly, we know what we're building. And for me, I worry more about that than the time to deliver part of it. Just the idea that we have this confidence that we know what we're building, I find super toxic to a startup culture that needs to be continuously questioning. I want everybody in the company to feel empowered to question this, to question the key assumptions. So by writing down what we're going to build, we're not surfacing our assumptions. We're not saying what's the underlying thinking and theories that are making us. So I find the difference here is the framework that I'm proposing. Firstly, it's based on, I didn't invent this stuff, right? I've just synthesized it from other people who've been very successful doing it. It's going to lead to you being able to learn, to clearly state your assumptions, and then to learn about how to delight your customers. A roadmap is probably going to lead to you building most of what's written on a roadmap. So just two very different goals. Finally, how often should you run experiments? Continuous process every time an assumption is introduced? Yeah, just continuously. Everything. Unless you've learned it, unless you've run an experiment to prove that something is true, then it's an experiment. So right now at Sama, we're early stage, less than 10 people. We're running growth experiments on a weekly iteration, which is about as fast as we can get right now. Product experiments at a couple of weeks stage. I think there's some good standard thinking on 2 weeks being a good cycle time for product experiments. But I find a lot of these sort of influencers, the authority figures on this, they have to pick a number. And so obviously, if you're working in a super fast moving consumer product where you're using a platform that can be updated very quickly, or SaaS, you can run experiments quickly. You could run a 2-day experiment if you have enough data. If you're working in more enterprise and it's going to take longer, then your experiment is going to take longer. So you should be running experiments continuously, and you should be tuning the experiment to meet your needs. Do you need a high degree of certainty? Is it massively risky? Well, then we probably need to run a number of experiments. Is it less risky? Then we can probably run them faster to improve that rate of learning. Are the insights from customer discovery questions the validation for your assumptions? Yeah. So yes, they absolutely can be. And that's the nice way of approaching the customer interviews, the customer discovery like this. It starts to validate your assumptions. Typically, the customer discovery, I find a great way to validate your the underlying jobs, pains, and gains. The outcome, the pain, and the outcomes and the problems that someone is getting. What you then need to figure out is which of those are the most important. So I like to go from that initial validation and interview, which I find works very well, through from there to running needs surveys. So you abstract from your interview data a set of needs. I need to arrive faster. I need to pay less. I need to feel safer. And then you can run a nice survey on that, which is well documented. I've got a blog post actually on that, something about your customers' burning needs that really breaks down how to do this. And then you can figure out which of these needs are the most important. Then finally, you can mock up some product to test whether the product idea you've got to address their needs is the right one. But almost all the time, the problem is not your idea for a product. The problem is your idea of what the needs are. Like repeatedly, this is the case. Is the next step after interviewing customers refining your value prop canvas? Yes, definitely. So run through the steps. So the first one is let me highlight that actually. Talk to customers, move the content from there onto the value prop canvas, do a needs survey, figure out which of the needs are the most pressing and the most unmet by the market, then do product mock-ups, the cheapest possible experiment you can run to get your idea for the solution in front of the customer. And always make sure that you're testing both for you're testing the VCR, the value proposition, the channel, and the revenue. And it's really powerful to test all those together. So if you're a B2C company that's going to be acquiring customers through ads, buy some ads and try and acquire your customers and into a landing page, throw your value proposition at them and see how they react. If you're an enterprise company who's going to be doing direct sales, do a small go out to 100 or 50 emails with the value proposition you're testing based on your interviews. The email is your channel, and try and convert those customers into a landing page or a conversation where you try and sell them. You really try and figure out, are they willing to buy your product? Because you have to validate all of those together. You only get strong validation when you look at value, channel, and revenue together. When you separate them, you get kind of wonky results. Thank you, Jojo, for that. Is the next step after interviewing customers, refining your value? Oh, what just happened there? I just answered that one, right? Sorry if I missed someone's question. Does your line manager role with 8 to RDR only do line? No. This is a person who's no, absolutely not. So the line manager has got a day job to do, which is more important. So I know there's a trend, quite a few startups are bringing on chief people officers early. I think that's fantastic. And you can probably supplement a lot of what I call a line manager here with a good chief people officer. A lot of what we're doing at Sama, where we're providing exec coaches to everybody in an organization, so that everybody within your startup can have a high trained exec coach, which was previously only available to the execs, is helping augment and ultimately replace a lot of the work of line management. But no, these line managers are out there doing their job. They just happen to be the best people in your org at nurturing your people. Rami, I don't know if it's intended or not, but I saw that the DevOps engineer was the guild owner over the CTO. Yeah, nice. Attention to detail. Fantastic. Yeah. The guild owner should be the person who is the best placed to run the job of the guild. It's not about hierarchy. It's not about ego. It's about who can do the job best. And if you believe it's the head of DevOps, not the CTO, then that's who it is. And that's one of the reasons I like the guilds model, is that you're breaking out pure technical expertise. One of the reasons we got to guilds is because at CloudMade, we kind of looked at how to change this. And we're like, hold on, if we just make our line managers the people who are really good at managing people, what about the people who have all this technical expertise? What about these people who's like the biggest C++ expert we've got? We need him to be able to coach all these other people. Then we figured we're actually talking about two different things here. We're talking about like your technical expertise level, which is the guilds, and then you've got your line management. CTO is a strategic position. Your CTO is strategic leadership. So it kind of makes sense that you buy that CTO some space, that they don't have to be in the nitty-gritty as well. Thank you, Remy. Thomas, in our B2B startup, we don't have statistically significant data. No one does. Don't worry about it. Hard to know what counts. Yeah. So look, every single person I meet who works for like Facebook or something like that, I ask this question, like, what gets you from 0 to 100% in terms of validation? 0 to sort of 40, 50 is just going out and talking to 5 users. So we can go from 0 to 50% validation, just talk to 5 of the right users and ask the kind of questions that I showed you here. You're going to go from 0 to 50. Run some needs surveys. You go from like sort of 50 to 60. Take some UI out to them. You go from 60 to, or start to run some experiments on correlated data, not causal data. You're going from 60 to 80. Win the jackpot and your product manager for Facebook, and you've got all of their data. You're going from 80 to 100. And you know what? Most of the time, no one has time, even in companies like Facebook, to run longitudinal A/B tests. It just takes too long. So most of the time, even in companies that have data, people are not running data. People are not running statistically significant tests anyway. Consistently, Thomas, I see your hand. I'm going to ask you next. consistently, when I've done this, I've seen the early results you get from testing, vast majority of the time are mirrored in the later results you get as you get more data. So don't stress about not having statistically significant data. Did you want to shout something, Thomas, actually? Sorry.
Yeah. So the problem which I'm having is actually on your slides, you were talking about predictions that you would expect from a validated hypothesis. And that's what I'm struggling with, to figure out what we should predict and what does success look like when it comes to that hypothesis. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that specifically.
First thing I would say is have a go at it and see where you get to. It's hard to say without knowing where exactly what your use case is now. But if, you know, it could be we believe that our value proposition is great, basically, that users love our product. To validate this, we're going to talk to 5 users. We're going to ask them these validation questions. If 4 out of 5 users give positive responses, as in, yes, that is a problem that they suffer from. Yes, they rate that it's important to them. Yes, they say that there isn't a good solution. Then we'll go to the next step. Then we'll buy some ads and we'll go out to 1,000 users. So you're just stepping it up bit by bit like that. You're breaking it down to very small pieces and addressing the problem like that. Does that help, Thomas? If not, drop me an email and with some specifics, and I'll see what I can do for you. Okay, last question, everybody, and thanks so much for all the questions. I'll leave more time for the next time. How do you organize yourself around tests? No, I mean, tests are just company culture. So I would get everybody in the company, particularly up to 150, 200 people, everyone, including finance. Let's start to talk about hypothesis-based work. And you then just make sure everything we do is a hypothesis. So we have a hypothesis for why we are doing something, and everyone shares the same view of the experiment backlog. It can be carved by different squads. It can be carved by different goals, but everything we do, we're just always focusing on what is the next test that we're running. So it's owned within, I guess, to your question, within the cross-functional teams. So within the thing I was talking about here, it sits within these teams. So these guys, we all have a common view of a backlog, and then there's a growth 1 experiment backlog, not product backlog. Growth 2, product 1, product 2. There's a common view of that. There is an individual view of the experiments that we're running. So thanks, everybody. Really good to see everybody here today. Thanks so much. I'm going to send you through this series of emails, so hope they're useful to you. Any feedback, give me a shout. And yeah, good to see you all here. Hope you have a good weekend and a good Friday before then.
Thanks, Nick.
See you later, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Good
Cheers,
stuff.
Nick.
Cheers. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.